Angry Birds. Created by Rovio and published in 2009, and the population exploded in the early 2010s. Angry Birds are everywhere, whether it's on t-shirts, toys, more games, Angry Birds songs, a spin-off game called Bad Piggies, and even sponsorships in Formula One. In today's episode of Racing Stories, me and my good friend and Angry Birds 2 content creator Blue Jimmy 48 fan will be going over the time when Angry Birds was in Formula One. With that being said, let's begin. Formula One 2012, one of the best and memorable Formula One seasons the sport has produced. For the first 7 races of the 2012 season, there were 7 different winners. Jenson Button winning at Australia, Fernando Alonso winning at Malaysia, Nico Rosberg winning at China, and bringing Mercedes back to the top step of the podium since the 1955 Italian Grand Prix, which was won by Juan Manuel Fangio. Formula One racing at Bahrain for the first time since 2010 due to the anti-government protests which cancelled the 2011 race, and Sebastian Vettel would win at Bahrain. Pastor Maldonado would shock the Formula One world and would win at Barcelona, which would be Williams' last F1 win as of the making of this video. Mark Webber winning at Monaco and Lewis Hamilton winning at Canada. Fernando Alonso winning at his home race of Valencia and Pastor Maldonado crashing Lewis Hamilton. Romain Grosjean causing a bad and stupendous accident at the start of 2012 Belgium Grand Prix in Spa-Francorchamps, which earned him a race ban. Kimi Räikkönen knowing what he was doing and won at Abu Dhabi since his return to the sport. Lewis Hamilton winning the United States Grand Prix at the newly built Circuit of the Americas, and finally the 2012 Grand Prix. Sebastian Vettel and Fernando Alonso were both looking for the 3rd championship since both had 2 titles at the time before the Interlagos race. And this was Michael Schumacher's last ever Formula One race, the end of an era. The race got dramatic when Sebastian Vettel, a championship contender, was involved in a lap 1 crash with Bruno Senna. However, Seb kept going and came back to finishing 6th, clinching his 3rd consecutive Formula One World Championship while Fernando Alonso finished in 2nd. 2012 was an exciting season for the sport with memorable moments. However, there's an F1 moment in 2012 that is not really remembered. This is where I let Blue Jimmy 48 fan tell the rest of the story. Take it away, Brandon.
Rovio's first interactions with Formula One began back in 2011, where Singapore Telecommunications Limited, otherwise known as Singtel, would feature a live version of Angry Birds to the racetrack for the 4th running of the Singapore Grand Prix. The game relied on the noise level of spectators to determine the speed at which the birds were shot through the air and how potent they would be against the horde of the green pigs. There would also be exclusive Angry Birds themed activities, competitions, and rewards planned throughout that race weekend. Derek Hang, who was the director of consumer marketing at Singtel, noted that the success of the Angry Birds games played an important factor in bringing this interactive experience to life. Singtel wanted to give their customers something to cheer about, and with Angry Birds continuing to grow and flourish internationally, it became the perfect storm. The jumbo version of Angry Birds being added on the big screen at the streets of Singapore was a success in bringing excitement and hype to Singapore's biggest sporting event of the year. But this would only be just the start of what's to come in 2012, otherwise known by many in the Angry Birds community as the Golden Age. On March 5th, 2012, it was announced that Roo Entertainment, the makers of the widely popular Angry Birds franchise, and Finnish Formula One driver Heikki Kovalainen, a closeted Angry Birds enthusiast, who at the time was racing for Caterham Renault, agreed to a sponsorship and co-branding deal. Hakey would also sport a special red-themed racing helmet for the 2012 Australian Grand Prix and some other races throughout that year. Hakey would start in 19th to kick off the year at Albert Park, but would last just 38 laps due to a suspension failure. For the moment, it looked like the sponsorship deal would be about as bad as a rotten egg. But things were only just beginning for Rovio's partnership with not just Hakey, but F1 as a whole. Angry Birds would make a return to the F1 grid later on at the Monaco GP, this time sponsoring the Lotus F1 Team with drivers Kimi Räikkönen and Romain Grosjean. Not only was this Lotus's 500th Grand Prix in F1 as an organization, but this also coincided with Angry Birds officially reaching 1 billion downloads. And to start, things would turn quite positive for both drivers, with Kimi qualifying 8th and Romain 5th. It was shaping up to be a solid weekend for the Lotus squad. Well, until the start of the race, that is. The worst case scenario would take shape. Grosjean's poor slingshot off the start of the race would leave the Lotus driver in a swarm of activity. Romain would be stuck almost 4 wide alongside Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, and Michael Schumacher. As Fernando was making his move, Romain clipped the left rear wheel of the Ferrari and would then be forced up into Michael's right front, damaging the suspension, and would soon spin in front of the rest of the grid, blocking the entry to turn 1. A chain reaction ensued as everyone was trying to avoid the spinning Grosjean. Sebastian Vettel would clip the front wing of the spinning Lotus but would escape without sustaining damage. Sauber's Kamui Kobayashi, however, would not be as fortunate. While trying to avoid on the racing line, Grosjean's car would move backwards just enough to clip the right rear of the slow-moving Kobayashi, lifting his car into the air, nearly taking out Jenson Button's McLaren in the process. Meanwhile, at the back of the field, Pastor Maldonado, who started last on the grid, would brake too late and crashed into Pedro de la Rosa, damaging both Maldonado's front wing and de la Rosa's rear wing. Not even one turn in, and just like that, another chance at a GP win gone. It felt like the pigs just ran away with the eggs. Grosjean would finish dead last in 24th, and even though Kimi Räikkönen would avoid the lap 1 fiasco, he was nowhere near race-winning pace, where in the end, he finished in 9th. After the 2012 Monaco Grand Prix and shortly after Engelbert's Hakey release, Rovio would also add a Lotus F1 Team tournament to the Engelbert's Friends Facebook web game from September 3rd to the 9th. The tournament was made to promote the Lotus F1 Championship, and players would compete for a chance to win prizes and even a signed race suit by Kimi Räikkönen himself. Whoa! There was even a second Lotus F1 Team tournament to promote Engelbert's Star Wars for Facebook, which lasted from November 12th to November 19th. Rovio and the Lotus F1 Team would reunite once more at the newly built Circuit of the Americas in Austin, Texas for the USGP. This time, Rovio would advertise their newest hit, Angry Birds Star Wars, which would go on to become one of the most beloved Angry Birds titles in the fandom. And thankfully for both Rovio and Lotus, it would be a much better outing, as both Räikkönen and Grosjean would finish 6th and 7th respectively. Sadly, after Coda, this would be the end of Rovio sponsoring a Formula 1 race team, but they wouldn't completely phase out of F1 entirely. On June 25th, 2012, a web-exclusive Angry Birds game titled Angry Birds Hakey would launch, starting as a preview on the Lotus F1 Team's Facebook page, with a new level added every race weekend. In the opening cutscene, the pigs steal the eggs and drive off in a stone-shaped F1 car. Kovalainen would then give Big Brother Bird Terrence his racing helmet to help the Angry Birds defeat the pigs. This is also known as Hakey Power. Players would then be able to use this special power through typing code facading, and from there you can replace whatever bird is in your slingshot and Terrence will show up in Hakey's red-themed helmet. Angry Birds Hakey would sadly close after the 2012 F1 season, but you can still play the game today through modding. However, if you're actually interested in playing it, I would advise you to do a background check just to make sure if the files don't contain any malware. Finally, 3 years later, in 2015, Rovio would pay tribute to one of the greatest F1 drivers in Ayrton Senna with a special Chuck model named Senna Bird, which was exclusive on Angry Birds Go. Senna Bird's ability was not only a slight increase in speed compared to Chuck, but also has the ability to slow down time. What's very unique about Senna Bird is that once the player has reached 41 victories, it would unlock Ayrton Senna's iconic yellow and green helmet in honor of the 41 victories Senna achieved in his F1 career. Ayrton would also become the 6th real-life individual to be featured in an Angry Birds title, and the 2nd character with the Chuck model since Freddie Mercury. Senna Bird, however, would not last very long, and by update version 2.0, he was removed from the game, and as of today, we still don't know what led to his deletion, and Angry Birds would soon no longer partner with F1 again after 2015. It was officially game over. As someone who's watched many forms of racing as well as played many Angry Birds games over the years, I and many others in the fandom genuinely enjoyed seeing Angry Birds as part of the F1 grid. Even long after the sudden disappearance of many Angry Birds titles in 2019, many people in the community still talk about Angry Birds Hakey and the Senna Bird update on Go today. While Angry Birds hasn't really sponsored anything racing related with the one exception of the 2017 Red Bull Soapbox car race, I wouldn't necessarily rule out the possibility of Rovio landing another sponsorship deal in racing. I've actually gotten the opportunity to speak to multiple Rovio employees and higher-ups, and for the most part, the idea of sponsoring and racing again isn't entirely out of the question. Let me know if you'd be interested in seeing Angry Birds return to racing, whether it be F1 again, INDYCAR, NASCAR, IMSA. Feel free to share it all in the comments below. Anyways, I want to thank Ian for having me on this episode of Racing Stories. Feel free to check out my YouTube channel, BlueJimmy48Fan, if you're interested in more Angry Birds content, weekly NASCAR live race reaction streams, ad track vlogs, and so much more. And now, back to you, Ian.
Thank you, Brandon. It's an honor to have you on in this episode. I've had my fair shares of playing some Angry Birds and wore some Angry Birds t-shirts when I was a kid. Truly one of the 2010s moments of all time. Anyway, so I have a question for you fellow viewers and Angry Birds fans out there. What is your favorite Angry Birds game and who is your favorite Angry Birds character? Tell me in the comments below. And that's going to do it for today's episode of Racing Stories. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Racing Stories. And once again, thank you to my good friend, Brendan, a.k.a. Blue GB48 fan, for being featured once again. This is Ian the Motorsports Man signing off. Goodbye, everybody.